The advocates of war insist it's not about oil. But when the fighting's over, it will have to be. Because everybody needs Iraq's massive reserves. For oil companies, it's a fight for survival.
For the super majors, it's essential to be in Iraq. They will not remain super majors if they're not part of Iraq's oil future.
But it's not just companies who are desperate for Iraqi oil. The West will soon begin to run short of supplies, and Iraq could be a lifeline.
Physical shortages are a real serious concern.
In fact, global oil production is on the brink of terminal decline. Some predict as soon as 2010. The consequences could be catastrophic.
We could look back in 20 years' time and see the present crisis as the first of the oil wars.
This is the story of the hidden agenda behind the invasion of Iraq. How much has this war really been about control over a dwindling resource?
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
8 days later, when Secretary Powell addressed the UN about weapons of mass destruction, he deliberately left out any reference to attempts to buy uranium from Africa.
I didn't use the uranium at that point because I didn't think that was sufficient.
If oil would be put at hazard, we should establish and maintain a strong U.S. military presence in the region and be prepared to use that force to protect our vital interests in the Gulf.
9/11 was the most shocking terrorist atrocity America has ever known. But according to Washington Post journalist Bob Woodward, Donald Rumsfeld saw it as an opportunity. The very next day, at a National Security Council meeting, Rumsfeld urged President Bush to attack Iraq immediately, even though there was absolutely no evidence of any connection between Saddam. A week into the invasion, US and British forces have gained a lot of ground. But the resistance has been far tougher than expected. But other major oil-producing regions are still in Iraqi hands. There is still a danger, as in Kuwait 12 years ago, that massive sabotage may hit oil production for months, if not years, to come. Whatever happens, rebuilding Iraq will be a huge job. Only American companies have been invited to bid for contracts, though have passed their peak. So many in the industry are now convinced we're fast approaching the day when world oil production starts to fall. For Shell, it's not a question of if, but when.
It will not be this year, next year. Within 20 years, if we have very high demand rates, we will be facing an issue. We have an issue ahead of us, probably sometime in the second quarter of this century, where we'll be looking at the decline of oil.
But Shell's prediction of falling oil production after 2025 may be optimistic. Scientists commissioned by the German government will this week announce that 2017 is the critical date. BP has no official forecast, but one scientist working for the company predicts decline could start by 2014. Colin Campbell and his group of independent geologists think it may start even sooner.
By about 2010, we face the onset of the permanent decline of production at about 3% a year. So it's a two-phase crisis. It starts with a price shock due to control of the market by a few countries, and it is followed by the onset of physical shortage, which just gets worse and worse and worse.
Global oil decline will put all previous oil shocks in the shade. In the 1970s, OPEC turned off the taps, causing global recession. But at least they could turn them back on again. This time, producers will pump as fast as they can, but still the shortages will grow. This time, it's forever.
The major impact will be the realization that cheap energy is no longer part of the future. And therefore energy is going to be priced high, whichever source we get it from. Therefore there are going to be lifestyle changes.
Those changes could be radical if alternatives to oil are not found soon. Unlimited use of cars and cheap flights around the world may well be a thing of the past. International trade, the very basis of the global economy, will suffer.
It'll be a poorer world. It'll be a much more restricted world in every way.
There are many good reasons for getting rid of Saddam Hussein. It seems the US administration privately thinks one of them is oil.
Compliant regime so that they can develop Iraqi oil exports in a way that is secure for Western oil consumers without putting money in the hands of an unpredictable radical Arab regime.
Last month, as preparations for war gathered pace, there were massive demonstrations around the world. Millions believed it was all about oil. But Donald Rumsfeld had changed his tune. Now he claimed that oil had nothing to do with it. So did everybody else who supported the invasion.
If the oil that Iraq has were our concern, I mean, we could probably cut a deal with Saddam tomorrow in relation to the oil. It's not the oil that is the issue, it is the weapons.
What would you say if you were them? You can hardly come out and say that we want to sacrifice the infantrymen or the Iraqi children and other civilians because of our selfish oil interests.
That widely held view so worried the US and Britain, they came up with a plan. At the Azores summit, on the eve of war, they promised to safeguard Iraq's oil.
We'll make sure that Iraq's natural resources are used for the benefit of their owners, the Iraqi people.
As no doubt they should. But there's a bigger point. It hardly matters who owns and profits from Iraqi oil, so long as it provides a growing and uninterrupted supply to the West. Regime change could boost Iraqi output, some say, by 3 or even 4 times, almost equal to Saudi Arabia. Could this be the real motive?
It is a war about oil. Because production is falling all over the world, Iraq has become crucial to the continuation of supply to the West, and hence the West's limit.
Internationally, France and Russia refused to join. Total and Luke stood to lose most from regime change. But by last week, America and Britain were